Thanks for staying with us on The Real Story. Our discussion about the federal investigation enveloping a former high-level budget official continues. I want to bring on political science professor Gary Rose, who hails from Sacred Heart University. Welcome back on The Real Story.
Good to be here, Jen. Thank you for having me.
All right, so no one obviously would be excited about a federal investigation during one of the biggest election years for Connecticut lawmakers. I mean, we have the governor's office up for re-election. We have all of our constitutional offices, all of the state legislature up for grabs, and we have this federal investigation looming over state government. We don't exactly know the full scope of it. We have an idea just because of the subpoena that was discovered in October. But what are some of the implications this could have for someone like the governor, who has said, again, just to be clear, that he wants to root out any alleged misuse of funds and wants to root out any kind of corruption that might have been in the administration?
Well, it has tremendous implications for the forthcoming election. I mean, we have right now a state that is being, of course, afflicted by inflation, extremely high gas prices, and a whole range of other issues. And so already there is some dissension out there among the electorate against Governor Lamont. Whether or not he is, of course, responsible for these problems, that's another matter. But nevertheless, that we have a very anxious electorate. And then if you add to the economic problems that are facing Americans now, and in particular facing Connecticut residents, and then if you add to that a federal grand jury investigation, which involves preferential contracts for just a small handful of companies, it's big, and it gets closer and closer to the governor as well as this thing continues. We've had a grand jury investigation, we've had subpoenas issued, and it all is very, very close to the Lamont administration. It's not as if we are hearing about civil servants far apart from the administration that have done nefarious things. Instead, we're talking about the deputy budget director here, the deputy of the Office of Policy and Management, and it really is. This is one of his individuals that are under investigation, and it looks as if it could potentially spread into other realms of the Lamont administration. So I see this as a very big issue that's emerging, and it will be even bigger, in which I really hope, in the interest of the Connecticut people, that the state legislature takes it upon themselves to start holding hearings and conducting investigation, apart from the grand jury investigation that's going on. So whenever you have a major scandal like this, preferential contracts for abatement projects in towns and schools and so forth, and you find that there are only a handful of companies that have gotten these preferential contracts, while a lot of other companies that have bid on the projects did not get the jobs. This is a serious matter. And like I said, if you add this corruption investigation to the myriad problems that are facing the state as it is, then I think that it really does have serious implications for the election in November.
Not to mention, we're talking about taxpayer dollars here, right? So if these towns and cities are getting pressured to choose a specific contractor, that might not have been the lower bid, right?
That's right.
That's taxpayer dollars on the hook.
That's exactly right. Taxpayer dollars at a time when people are stretched out on their own, and there's a lot of concern about property taxes and sales taxes and the income tax, and then we find out that tax dollars are being used to really, pad a handful of companies too, in particular, that have gotten so much of the work in terms of abatement projects, that I think it is a huge issue that's emerging. And anytime, and I just read in a newspaper a while back, it's being referred to as Diamantis Gate, who is, of course, the individual who is the center of all of this. But anytime you add a gate to a scandal, then you know that it's an important one, and it is. This is big in Connecticut.
Yeah, I think of when you said that Bridgegate over with Chris Christie when I was reporting in Philadelphia.
That's right. We've had Watergate.
That.
Yeah. Yep. We've had Contragate. Iran gate. And if you put a gate at the end, you know there's something going on there.
Not good. Again, these are all allegations at this point, but we know the feds are looking into this. You touched on this. All of the actions of state lawmakers are going to be scrutinized too during this election year. And we know that Republican lawmakers called for a bipartisan committee to look into the misappropriation of school construction grants. It looks like the Speaker of the House, as well as the the lead Democrat, Martin Looney, in the Senate, both said that there was urgency there and that we should look at that. What are the implications in terms of the party and this alleged and this not alleged investigation and this investigation? What does that mean for Democrats? Are they going to have to start to separate themselves a little bit from the governor's administration? I mean, how does this work?
Well, we have a number of people that in the legislature, and as you say, Democrats who will probably do their best to disassociate themselves from the Lamont administration. That's not going to work these days. And even though there might be bipartisan cooperation, as you mentioned, the bottom line here is that this is part of the Democratic Party's administration. And even though the legislature is, of course, separate from the executive branch, they are nevertheless part of the same team. And as this investigation unfolds, I would not at all be surprised if you start to learn, some Democratic lawmakers, they weren't necessarily involved in the decision to give preferential contracts, but they knew of those decisions because of their association with Mr. Diamantis. And of course, their association with the governor. And so, when we start putting people under oath, that's when we're going to find out more. And I, for one, do not think that, some high-level Democrats, despite perhaps trying to keep this thing at arm's length, can do so when a serious investigation begins. They can obviously derail the investigation if it's in the legislature, but when a grand jury is doing that investigation, and if some of them are subpoenaed and asked to testify, then it's going to affect the party as well. So this, I don't want to, try to sound like this is really engulfing all Democrats, but I would say this is part of a political system here in our state where one party has had, tremendous dominance over state legislatures, over the state legislature and over our politics. And so then when you start to learn about how these contracts took place, the preferential contracts, it does include not just the governor's administration, it does include the party as a whole. And so I don't see how Democrats can continue to escape this, quite frankly.
And no doubt, Republicans have already, it becomes a political issue too. Republicans last week holding a press conference calling for, a hearing on this. We know certainly the governor's challenger, Bob Stefanowski, will be talking about this, has talked about this already. So it's being used as a political missile already.
Well, sure. We had the State of the Union address, and then after that, a reporter, of course, spoke to Bob Stefanowski, who was in the building. And the very first thing he said on TV was, that the Lamont administration was under federal investigation and that a grand jury was looking into this scandal. And as the press, yourself and others, of course, continue to expose this scandal to the public, I don't see how it does not have implications for the election. And it's not just going to be campaign ads run by Bob Stefanowski and his people, against the Lamont administration. It's the press as well that's doing its job quite well so far. And I'm very I'm very impressed actually with what I've read in the papers and what I've seen on TV. Yeah. And the press is doing its job as a watchdog, which it was intended to be.
Yeah, we have some, really good investigative journalists in this state. Dave Altamari, Mark Pazniokis, Chris Keating. They're doing some important work right now.
That's right.
Local journalism is very important. All right, Professor Gary Rose, we appreciate your time as always. Thanks for coming on and giving us a little clarification about the implications of what a federal investigation into state government can do during an election year. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, that does it for us on The Real Story. If you want to watch these segments again, head to fox61.com or download the Fox 61 app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61. Have a great morning.